Welcome to the Growth Mindset Book Podcast, Mindset Mastery chapter by chapter. I'm Michael Fox, best-selling author and expert mindset coach, and your guide on this transformative journey. Here, we don't just skim pages of the most powerful self-help and mindset books ever written. We dive deep, sometimes just a few paragraphs at a time, to truly understand and apply their life-changing principles. Each episode builds on the last, so if this is your first time here, I encourage you to start episode 1 of season 1 and follow along as we explore every corner of these timeless works. Together, we'll study, reflect, and unlock the tools you need to master your mindset, overcome limiting beliefs, and create the life you've always imagined. So grab your book, a notebook, or just a favorite drink, and let's dive into today's insights. Your journey to transformation starts now. Welcome to season 2. We're going to have a lot of fun. We're going to start with a new book, and it's a book that so many people have heard about. People have seen the documentary, people have read the book, and I want to tap into it and potentially give you a perspective on this book that maybe you haven't heard before. Go deeper on a lot of the things that are said in the book so that we see it from a completely different perspective. Because it's easy, again, to pick up a book and read it and get the basic concepts of it. But quite frankly, in this book, this is a book that can be studied, because if you just took the sentence and spent an hour on the sentence, you could get so much from that. But again, a lot of us are busy. We don't have time. So you luckily have me to listen to in the gym or in the car or wherever you might be right now. And I'm going to help break it down for you and make it more understandable so that you can really start to apply this information in your life, because that's the key. We don't want to just read something. We want to read it, get it, and then apply it in our life. Because if we do that, that's when we're going to see change. Change occurs through application, through taking action. So welcome back. Season 2, episode 1. We're going to be talking about the book, The Secret. And again, great book. You really could just take this book and read it over and over again. And if you do that, you're going to get an understanding of how this law of attraction really works. We hear it spoken about on social media. You'll see a video come up and say, you can attract whatever you want in your life. And without understanding what that really means, it's very difficult to have faith in the principle of law of attraction. But again, we're going to dive in deep. We're going to hit certain key points of it and discuss it and give you a really, really good understanding of it. So let's jump in. We are on page 3. I'm just starting at what is the secret. That's the section that I'm starting on. So Bob Proctor starts out by saying, you probably have been sitting there wondering, what is the secret? I'll tell you how I've come to understand it. So he's going to give us his understanding of what this secret is that they're talking about in the book, The Secret. He says, we all work with one infinite power. In order to continue with this book, we have to be willing to say to ourselves, I'm open to accepting that there is some infinite power out there. It may not be the God that's written about in any of the religions. And maybe it is for you, and that's fine. But there is some power out there that is controlling lots of things in this world. It's controlling trees to grow from an acorn. How in the world does that happen? It controls a sperm and an egg coming together and forming a cell, and the cell splits and it splits again. And then ears develop and nose develops, mouth, and arms and legs. It's just truly miraculous. The whole bone structure of the baby develops. How does that happen from the splitting of a cell? And people might say, well, there's DNA, and the DNA, well, where does this DNA come from? This is kind of a miraculous code that's written which tells us how we're going to grow and how we're going to develop. But where in the world did that come from? It's my opinion, and it's an important thing to accept if we're going to continue in this book, that there is a higher power of some sort that is controlling everything. And again, we've talked about this in the other book, which is it controls our heartbeat. Forget everything else in our body, all the organs, cells, everything that's happening on its own, the blood flow. Our heart, how does it know to do this? And how does it not stop? Really think about that while you're wherever you are right now. Your heart is beating right now in your chest. It is doing this incredible thing. How is that doing that? What's controlling that? And again, there is a force, a greater power. We all work with an infinite power that controls everything. And by the way, that infinite power is inside of us. Again, going back to talking about the cell that split and it split and then there was DNA, that's coding is built into us. That part of us that's operating all of these things inside of us, that subconscious mind, which is a deep part of our mind, which is connected to this intelligence, to this infinite power. And that power is controlling everything inside of us. So again, to walk around and say to yourself, I am not powerful. I am not good enough. I am not strong. I am not smart enough. There just simply isn't the case, because you're walking around with a power inside of you that is so strong and so powerful that it is literally controlling everything inside of your body. Your digestive system is digesting the food. Somehow, miraculously, that power exists inside of you. The filtration system, your kidneys and your bladder, it's filtering out the bad and it's excreting it from your body. Well, how is that working? And again, I'm using these points because I think it's really important to have the understanding that this infinite power exists. And not only does it exist outside somewhere, it's actually right inside of us. And so if we know that, we can never walk around and tell anyone anything bad about ourselves, because that power lives right inside of us. That power controls many things inside of us, and we can tap into that power. And that's part of what this book is all about. It's tapping into this infinite power that exists right inside of us and using it to help us, just like it helps with all the other things that it does for us on. And how often do you think our heart beats? How many times do you think it beats per year, our heart? That thing that just contracts and expands, and it's doing it on its own, and it's pushing blood all throughout our body, and it's circulating all our life force, because if that heart stops, we no longer exist, at least in our body. 42 million heartbeats per year. Your heart beats 42 million times per year. How are you doing that? You're not. There's an infinite power. There's a power that's right inside of you. That power is doing all the work. That power is available to you anytime. And I know I'm repeating this, but it needs to be heard. It needs to sink into our subconscious mind that I am powerful. I have infinite power right inside of me. God, or that infinite power, whatever you call it, the universe, that power exists right inside of us, and we can tap into it right now. What else? How about how many times do you breathe in and out per year? How many times do you think? It's 7.8 million times you breathe in and out. Now, who's controlling that? How are you actually breathing? You go to sleep at night, you're not thinking about your breathing, but somehow you're breathing in, you're breathing out, you're breathing in, You're breathing out. Your heart is beating. How is that happen? Isn't this incredible? Like a lot of times we don't really sit back and think about how all of this stuff is actually occurring, but it's occurring and it's miraculous and it's powerful and it's something to be unbelievably grateful for, right? Because if any of these systems stop functioning, we have issues, at least with our body. You get a nice cut. You don't need stitches, but it's pretty good. You put a Band-Aid, something to clean it out, a little bit of medicine on there. But what does your body actually start to do? It starts to heal. It starts to form a scab. And then the scab eventually falls off and the skin underneath is repaired. How is that happening? It's this infinite power that is right inside of us. It's working inside of us all the time. And if the only thing you get from this recording today is that you have this power inside of you and you are that power, you are a part of that power, then never again could you feel bad about yourself because you are working with this incredible power and that is a part of you. Got it? Get it? Good. All right, let's move on back to the book. So all that time that we just spent, that was on the first sentence. Most people would read the sentence, we all work with one infinite power, and they wouldn't really digest what that meant like we just did. But let me ask you this question. The fact that we just spent that time and went through that infinite power, doesn't that mean a whole lot more to you now than if you just would have read that really quick and then moved on to the next sentence? That's why we take the time to do what we're doing here, is to really digest what it's saying here. So let's move on to the second sentence, which says, we all guide ourselves by exactly the same laws. The natural laws of the universe are so precise, we can send people to the moon and we can time the landing with the precision of a fraction of a second. What I want to focus on here is the natural laws of the universe. What are these natural laws of the universe? How do these natural laws of the universe affect us? Let's use a very simple law of the universe, gravity. If you go and walk to the edge of a bridge and you step off of the bridge, what will happen? Of course, you're going to fall. Why do you fall? Because gravity pulls you down. There's a force, there's a law called gravity. We can't see it, but it exists and we know it because if I take myself and I walk to the edge of the bridge and I step off, I'm not going up in there. I'm going to go down and I'm going to go into the water. So there are lots of laws in the universe that are out there. Gravity is one of them. There's also one called the law of cause and effect. In religious texts, it'll say something like, as you sow, so shall you reap. In other words, what you put out there comes back. If you're angry and you put out anger out in the world, anger is what's going to come back to you. If I go up to someone at a store and I'm upset and I start yelling at them, the chances of them treating me really well is not so good. Why? Because of the law of cause and effect. Whatever we put out comes back. Sometimes when we put it out, it comes back instantly. Other times it doesn't. It'll come back in other times. For example, maybe I'm at work and I get into an argument with the boss and I'm really angry and I'm spewing anger and anger. Nothing's coming back at me right this second. Then I get home and my wife is really upset and she starts yelling and screaming about something that happened. That is part of the law of cause and effect. What I continuously put out will come back in some other way. Let me ask you this question. You go into a store, you bring something up to the cash register, you give them $40. They're supposed to give you $5 back in change. Instead, they give you $20 back in change. You see it, you notice it, and you don't do anything. You stick it in your pocket and you're like, yes, I got it. I made money on this transaction. I'm taking the money and I'm running. Based on the law of cause and effect, what do you believe might happen as you move through your day, week, or month? I can hear what you're saying, whether you're thinking it or saying it out loud. It's going to come back in some way or another, right? Maybe I get a random charge for $20 that I wasn't expecting. Maybe I get a parking ticket and it's $20. You can't get away with it. Even though it feels like you might be getting away with something, in the moment, maybe, but in the short to medium to long term, guaranteed you're not. That's because there's a law of cause and effect. That's the way it works. I want to tell you a story. I love this story related to the law of cause and effect. There was a homeless man. This is a true story. It was in 2013. A homeless man in Kansas City. He finds a diamond ring and he obviously is in a terrible situation. He could take that to the pawn shop, sell it and get money, and then be able to at least get himself food and help take care of himself. However, he was able to find the owner and he gave the ring back to the owner. Think about that. That is someone that's homeless that could really use the money, takes the ring, gives it back. Now, let's talk about the law of cause and effect. What ends up happening? Well, the owner gets it back, and she and her husband were so blown away that the homeless man actually gave back this ring to her that she and he on social media started a fundraiser for the homeless person and ended up raising $190,000 for the homeless person. He gave it back, and the law of cause and effect spoke. It said, as you sow, so shall you reap. You gave back something that was of value that wasn't yours to someone else. Therefore, I'm going to give you something of value that wasn't yours. And therefore, he ends up getting a check and money for $190,000. Now, if you're homeless, do you think $190,000 might change your life? That might change anyone's life. If you got a check for $190,000, that's life changing. The point to the story is we can't get away with anything. So if we have a choice on what we can put out into the world, what do you think would be the best thing for us to put out into the world? Would it be positive, kind, nice, loving, caring things? Or would it be anger, upset, resentment? Whatever you put out will come back to you. As you sow, so shall you reap. That is the law of cause and effect. Hey there. I hope you're loving today's episode of the Growth Mindset Book Podcast. If this show has been inspiring you or bringing value to your life, I'd love your support to keep it going strong. You can buy me a cup of coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Michael Fox Coach. Again, that's buymeacoffee.com/Michael Fox Coach. Your support helps cover production costs and lets me keep sharing this incredible journey with you. Thanks for being a part of the community. And now let's get back to the episode. These laws of the universe are extremely powerful. You may not know of all of them, and that's fine. I want to talk about one more, and it's called the law of vibration. And essentially what the law of vibration says is everything in this world, on this planet, everything around you, your iPad, your phone, your computer, your clock on the wall, your watch, whatever it is, it's all vibrating. What do you mean it's vibrating? Like, well, if you break down all of these things that we have, right, whether it's the table that I'm sitting at, the computer, you break it down to its smallest molecules. What are they, right? There's atoms and then subatomic particles. But those subatomic particles, when you look under a microscope, you will see that there is a constant state of vibration. There is movement in everything. If you look at your hand under a microscope, you're looking at it right now and you're not seeing any movement. But if you look at it under a strong enough microscope at an atomic level, you will see this vibration and movement happening, even though you can't necessarily see it with your own two eyes. And these vibrations, right? My computer is vibrating at a very different frequency or amount of vibrations. The speed of the vibration is different than maybe my hand and body. You know, my heart is vibrating at a different frequency than other things. My computer monitor is vibrating. There's all these frequencies. And what essentially a frequency is, it's that vibration. It's the vibration that is occurring on whatever it is that we're looking at. Now, here's the interesting thing. Our thoughts, our words, all vibrate at a certain frequency. So if I'm thinking negative thoughts, those are vibrating at a different frequency than positive thoughts. So everything is vibrating at a different frequency. There's high frequency thoughts. There's low frequency thoughts. There's high frequency experiences. There's low frequency experiences. Norman Cousins, he wrote a book called The Anatomy of an Illness. He had a really crippling and painful disease, and the doctors were treating him with all kinds of medications, and he just couldn't take it. So he checked himself out of the hospital and into a hotel room. And what he did inside the hotel room was he decided, I'm just going to watch really funny comedies, really funny movies, so that I can get myself laughing and feeling good and vibrating on a very different frequency than he was when he was sitting in the hospital in a lot of pain and thinking all these negative thoughts about how this disease is taking over his life and will he ever get better? Think about that for a second. If you're sitting there and focused on how you're not feeling good, what frequency are you operating on? Would that be a high level or a low level? Well, clearly, if we're focused on sickness, that's a low level frequency. Well, if that frequency is affecting the cells in our body, and our cells in our body are operating on a low frequency and they're vibrating at a very different frequency than it would if it's healthy, what will continue to happen in our body? We're going to continue to not feel good because we're consistently thinking this negative thought, which is putting us on this frequency of illness. If you think that this sounds a little bit crazy, if you study it, you'll realize it's not crazy at all. This guy, Norman Cousins, wrote a book. He's one of so many people that have experienced stuff like this. So what he did was he spent all this time laughing and feeling good and watching these movies that made him have this belly laugh where he was laughing so hard. Can you remember a time where you were laughing really hard like that and you're crying, like you have tears coming down your face? Do you remember how good you felt after? And you're vibrating on a completely different frequency when that's occurring. And good things occur when you're vibrating on that frequency. You just feel great. He decided, I'm going to put myself in that frequency on a consistent basis. What do you think ended up happening? He healed himself from this unbelievably painful and terrible disease. What power does this give you to realize and understand that if I can control the frequency that I'm operating on a consistent basis, what might happen in my life? If you're someone out there that's listening to this that feels anxious a lot, what negative thoughts are you thinking consistently? Because I guarantee you, You're thinking negative thoughts. They're putting you into a negative vibration. That negative vibration is operating in the cells of your body. And then you go into a feeling of anxiety. If you keep doing the same thing, you will keep feeling the same way. But the beautiful thing is, if we can control the level of our vibration, that frequency that we're operating on most of the time, then we will literally change our lives. If you're operating on a positive frequency, if you're focusing on things that are funny and laughing and having fun, and you say to yourself, I'm going to work, but I'm also going to have a lot of fun as I'm working. What do you think is going to happen to your day? Will it be a good day or a not so good day? Obviously, it's going to be a good day. But when you show up to work, and we've all done this before, you show up to work, you're not feeling good. You woke up on the wrong side of the bed. You had a fight with someone at home. The kids did something that upset you. And now you show up to work operating on that frequency. What starts to happen? Well, don't people say to you, Mike, what's happening? Are you okay? You seem really like something's really bothering you, right? Because you're operating on a specific frequency that is detectable by other people. Because if you're not operating on the same frequency as someone else, won't they sense that? Haven't you sensed that? Do you remember going into a friend's house? They're married. You go in and you just know that they've been fighting and they've been arguing. They never said anything, but you can feel it. You can feel there's some real serious tension in the air. Why are you picking that up? Because that's a level of frequency, and your frequency is very different. So when you walk into this new frequency, this vibration, this feeling, that's what you start to feel. I don't like this feeling. That's the law of vibration. These universal laws are so important to understand, because if you just understand this one law, the law of vibration, that you're operating on a frequency, that your cells in your body are operating on a specific frequency, and when it's in a negative frequency, things can happen that aren't so good, right? You get sick, you get ill, you get a disease, because your body's operating on a negative frequency. But if you can reverse that and do what Norman Cousins did and get yourself to laugh and just consistently laugh, laughter therapy, right? You do that. What do you think starts to happen potentially to the cells of our body? They're no longer operating on that frequency. All of a sudden, they're vibrating at a different pattern. And if that's the case, what do you think might happen to the overall health? Clearly, you can get better. And Norman Cousins isn't the only person that this has happened to. Les Brown, who's a huge personal development speaker, had a similar thing. He was diagnosed, I believe it was cancer. And instead of getting treatment, he decided to do something very similar with laughter. And he spent 2 hours a day laughing. What do you think ended up happening? He healed his cancer without any treatment, because the cells of his body were operating on a completely different frequency. When I say we are working with one infinite power, that power inside of us, that is part of the power. Part of the power is knowing that we can operate on different frequencies. And whatever frequency we operate at is what we're going to end up feeling and getting more of. If I turn on the news and I watch all these negative stories, what frequency am I operating on as I'm watching the news? Is it going to be a positive or negative? Of course, it's going to be negative. Will that have an impact? Yes. The more negative frequency we're on, the worse it is for us, because our cells and all our body, everything is operating on a negative frequency. That is not good. You want the cells of your body to be in a place that's safe and good and healthy. But when you're watching the news and focusing on negativity and focusing on all the bad things in life and speaking negatively about other people and not forgiving people and holding all that resentment inside, what do you think the cells of your body, what frequency are they operating on? They're operating on a very negative frequency. When the cells operate and vibrate at a specific frequency, they act and produce very different results in your body. So we know this to be true. And if that's true, then we can use this law of vibration to literally change our life. And the way that we use it is we stay in a positive, upbeat place. Focus on gratitude and things that you're grateful for in your life. There's so much to be grateful for. We've spoken about this before. Gratitude is key. It's not making a list of 5 things that you're grateful for. I did my morning gratitude list. No, you go downstairs and you see your wife and you say, I am so grateful to have this person in my life. I am so grateful for the love and the care and the compassion, the friendship that we have. And if you're not getting along with your wife for whatever reason, think about someone that you are getting along with, someone that you are grateful to have in your life, and focus on that and keep going to gratitude. Now, when you're operating in gratitude, what do you think frequency? What's happening with the frequency of your body? What frequency are you operating on? Is it positive or negative? Positive. And when you're operating a positive vibration and the cells of your body are operating in that vibration, people can feel it. Haven't you had the same experience where you walk into a room and someone is so upbeat, so happy that it's literally contagious? They're vibrating at a specific frequency that you're not on, and suddenly you're affected by it, but you're affected by it in a very positive way. I'm going to wrap it up today with this. What is the frequency that I'm consistently operating on? And if it's negative, that's okay. But what we want to do is start working on making it positive. And again, we haven't even gotten into this book yet, right? We're just talking, we're on the second or third sentence of this book. But you can see that when it says natural laws of the universe, there's so much more to that sentence. You could write books on the law of vibration, that frequency. You could write books on that. And here it's just mentioned, and most people will read that and it'll just go right by it and it will mean nothing to them. And you're missing the real meaning of the book. So that said, I hope this was helpful for you today. I want to ask you a couple questions before we jump off. How can you use this newfound knowledge, this law of vibration? How can you use that to help yourself today? What's one thing that you can do today to make sure that you're operating on a positive frequency? Think about the answer to that question. And the most important thing is, don't just say, yeah, I'll do that later. Just think about the answer to the question and then give yourself an action that you can take now to put this into place. Because if you just change the way you're operating your frequency right now, if you just look at your health and forget everything else that it's going to affect in your life, everything changes. You'll start to feel better because your cells in your body are vibrating at a different frequency than they once were. This applies to money. This applies to your career. This applies to every area of your life. And we're just digging in. We're on season 2, episode 1. We're just starting. I don't know how long we're going to spend on this book, but we're going to spend it until I feel like we've gotten a lot out of it and we're ready to move on. So until the next episode, just stay really focused on what vibration, what frequency am I operating on? And number 2 is I have this incredible power inside of me. It's this infinite power. It's controlling all these major systems in my body. And for that reason alone, I can never say to anyone ever again that I'm not good enough or I'm not smart or I'm not anything that's negative, because you're the opposite of that. You're unbelievably powerful. And you were just told over the years, these lies, these limiting beliefs that you're not good enough. you got a bad grade on a test and thought, man, I'm stupid. No, you're not stupid. You know what it was? You weren't interested in what you were learning. That's the truth. But the truth that you accepted was, I'm stupid. And that wasn't the truth. That was actually totally false. The truth of the matter is I had zero interest in what I was learning, or I didn't study. That was the truth. But it doesn't mean you're stupid. That's a very different thing. So I'm cutting it at this. I hope this was helpful. This season is going to be an unbelievable season. Share this podcast with other people, because I promise you that if it's having an impact on you, it's going to have an impact on other people. And you can be the reason why someone else gets this information, and it helps them grow, and it helps them learn, and it helps them vibrate at a better energy level, and it helps them feel better. So share it with other people. I love you. I appreciate you. And I wish you nothing but greatness, happiness, peace, love, just everything that you're looking for. You already are that. You just forgot that you're that. And I'm going to keep reminding you that's who you are. Have a wonderful day. I hope today's episode inspired you to take one step closer to mastering your mindset. If you're ready to dive deeper, visit michaelfoxcoach.com. Again, that's michaelfoxcoach.com for more resources, insights, and ways to connect. While you're there, don't forget to join our free community shown at the bottom of the website and connect with others who are on the same growth journey. Let's keep growing together, and I'll see you on the next episode.